All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us for Josh's second presentation. Last week, if you weren't there for that, he gave a very great presentation about solar energy, specifically community solar programs and ways that we can support low and moderate income resident access to these programs. So that is on our YouTube page, BCRC YouTube page, as well as the energy tab of our website if you'd like to catch that presentation. But today, Josh is going to present on some of the weatherization research that he has done. He spoke to a lot of people, including I think some of you that are on this call today, and did a really good deep dive into some of these programs and came up with some recommendations. So with that, I will hand it over to Josh to let him introduce himself and take it away with his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. Let me just screen share really quickly. Okay. You can all see that, right? Okay.
Yes.
So good afternoon, everyone. Like Callie said, my name is Josh Kirshner. I'm a junior at Williams College. And this summer, I was the energy equity intern here at the Bennington County Regional Commission. And today, I'm going to be talking about understanding gaps in uptake in state weatherization programming here in Bennington County. Before I begin, if you got a chance to see my presentation last week on community solar models, the beginning of this presentation might be kind of similar, so just keep that in mind. So to start off with today, I want to talk about Vermont's energy goals. So Vermont is considered a leader in climate and energy policy, and its goals really reflect that. According to the 2022 Comprehensive Energy Plan, Vermont has set itself to reduce its energy usage by 30% by 2050, and also specifically to weatherize 120,000 homes by 2030. Here in Bennington County, our goals are also similarly pretty ambitious. We're looking to reduce our energy usage by 50% by 2050, and also to increase the usage of electricity by 50% by 2050 as well. So when we talk about the energy transition here in Vermont, we have to talk about cost. So Vermonters have some of the highest energy costs in the entire country. Using census data, we can calculate that the average Vermonter spends about $2,900 a year on energy, and that varies very broadly from a couple $100s to tens of thousands of dollars. Here in Bennington County, it's actually a bit more expensive. It's about $50 to $100 more expensive on average for energy. And so to better understand how our residents are affected by their energy costs, we can look at energy burden. And this is a metric of total energy spending as a percentage of total household income. And so it gives us an indication of how much of a strain energy spending is on household financial stability. So again, using census data, we can calculate that while the average Vermonter spends about 10% of their income, here in Bennington, the average burden is actually about 12%, so it's a bit higher. Interestingly, here in the county, across the different towns, there's also some variation. So while Landgrove and Peru have the lowest energy burdens, Bennington, the town itself, has the highest. It's also important to recognize that energy burden is not shared equally across income quintiles. More specifically, while the people of the bottom 20% of income earners in the county spend about actually much the least amount on energy, they actually have the highest energy burdens. More specifically, while the bottom 20% of income earners in the county spend about 25% less on energy annually, they spend about 8 times more on about 8 times more of their income annually than that top 20% of income earners. And so as we can see here, there is a massive disparity, and a lot of the burden is falling onto low-income residents to kind of pick up for these expensive energy costs. So moving forward a little bit, so what is weatherization and why are we talking about it today? So weatherization generally is any home improvement measure or project that is intended to make a home more energy efficient. So this includes installing LED light bulbs or putting in window inserts or changing some fixtures in your house, and also includes larger scale renovations such as insulation or finishing your basement or adding a heat pump or more efficient heating system. So really anything to make your house less energy intensive. And so the Vermont has identified weatherization as a key tool and strategy in lowering total energy usage, and specifically usage in the thermal sector. So again, according to the 2022 Comprehensive Energy Plan, 50% of state energy goes towards the thermal energy sector, and 30% of total energy goes specifically towards home heating. And so reducing our energy usage in the thermal sector can really help to lower our overall usage. And this also applies down here in Bennington, where we're seeing similar patterns. According to the BCRC energy plan, about 32% of energy spending in the county is spent on home heating. So if weatherization is an attempt to help cut down on our energy usage and to conserve energy, so we can bring down overall usage. And the state has been pretty ambitious about this. Back in 2008, we set a goal of weatherizing 80,000 homes by 2020 and 120,000 by 2030. Unfortunately, we're actually pretty behind on this goal. We missed the 80,000 goal. As of 2020, we've weatherized about 30,000 homes. And in order to reach our next goal, we have to weatherize another 90,000 homes the next 7.5 years. But so broadly speaking, weatherization has some great benefits that make it a very effective tool. First of all, there's some obvious environmental benefits. Weatherized homes use less fuel and so therefore have to burn less fossil fuels and can help to lower emissions. Here in Bennington County in 2021, through the work of 3 weatherization organizations in the county, we were able to reduce our carbon emissions by over 3 million pounds of carbon dioxide. So it's a significant drop. There's also some great financial benefits. Less fuel usage means lower energy bills because we have to spend less on fuel. And this can really help to bring savings to households. These savings range from a couple hundred to over $1,000 annually. And so that can lower costs and significantly lower burden. On average, it lowers energy burden by about 10 to 30%, but also can be much higher. Finally, there's also some really good health benefits to weatherization. Weatherized homes are just generally more healthy to live in. For example, homes that are more insulated and have better ventilation, the residents are less at risk for asthma or respiratory illnesses. Additionally, homes that are better at maintaining temperatures, those residents are less likely to at lower risk for cardiac events or strokes or pneumonia or flu or other illnesses. And so it's just so weatherized homes can just put people at a much less risk for certain illnesses. So moving on a little bit. So in Vermont's efforts to weatherize all these homes and its strategy to lower weatherization, in a strategy to increase weatherization, excuse me, they've made sure that equity and low-income access has been a major part of this strategy. This is because low-income households have the most to gain from weatherization and also the least access. And so what I mean by this is that low-income households have the most to gain because, as I've been talking about, they have the highest energy burden. They spend the most of their income on energy. And so any measures that can help to lower their energy costs can generate savings for them and really help to ease that financial burden off them. Also, generally speaking, low-income households tend to be at high risk for certain environmental or safety hazards. And so weatherizing can really help to bring some health benefits to them. But at the same time, low-income residents are less likely to weatherize simply because weatherization is quite expensive. According to the Office of Economic Opportunity here in Vermont, while the cost of a project varies dramatically based on the scope of the size, the average is about $9,500. And so this is an expense and a cost that many residents, particularly in the area, just don't have the access to pay for. And so as a result, there is much less uptake within the lower income levels. And so the state has been pretty adamant about making sure that they are being equitable in this focus on weatherization. When they first set that goal to have 80,000 homes weatherized by 2020, they said that 20,000 of those homes had to be low income. Again, we're pretty off track with that one. Since 2008, we've weatherized just under 11,000 low income homes. So we're pretty off track. And the state has also really put its money where its mouth is. Most recently, the state legislature approved an unprecedented $45 million for low income weatherization, another $35 million for moderate income weatherization. And so this money is being used to fund and support organizations and programs that help to lower that cost for residents. And so the next portion of this presentation, I'm going to talk about, so what are those options? What are the current offerings for low-income residents? What are they offering? What are the services? And what are some of the financial benefits? The first one I want to talk about is Brock Community Action. So stepping back a little bit, so the Vermont Weatherization Assistance Program is a federally and state-funded program that is the primary driver for low-income weatherization. It is a part of the state government that offers free and comprehensive weatherization services for low-income residents around the state. And here in Bennington County, the organization that implements this program on behalf of the state is Brock Community Action. And so Brock is a local community organization that offers services for low-income households in immediate need. So they offer fuel assistance, and there's a food shelter in town, and they offer childcare, for example. And one of the things that they offer is comprehensive free weatherization. And so low-income residents can call Brock, and they will come to their house, and they will conduct an energy audit. So they will see what in the house can be renovated and what can help to increase energy efficiency in the house, and what are the costs and what are the savings associated with that. And then from there, Brock will either send its own crew members or subcontractors and do a comprehensive and a thorough home renovation at no cost to the homeowner. And again, while the projects do vary in the amount of cost they have, again, the average is about $9,500 according to the Weatherization Assistance Program and the Office of Economic Opportunity. And so Brock has had some success in the area. In 2021, they conducted 79 projects in Bennington County, and have done approximately 185 since 2019. And they've also just seen some recent uptick in demand. Another organization I want to talk about is Heat Squad. And so Heat Squad is not related to the Weatherization Assistance Program. It's not a government organization. It's its own independent entity. And so what Heat Squad does is that it offers low-cost weatherization assistance. And so Heat Squad doesn't actually do the home renovations or much of the actual renovation, or the actual weatherization, excuse me, but they do offer start to finish comprehensive assistance. And so what this means is that Heat Squad for $150 will come to a house and they will do a comprehensive energy audit again. So they will see what in the house needs to be renovated, what are the costs, what are the savings, and what are some of the available rebates and incentives available. And so once they've done that report, Heat Squad will then put a household in contact with a local and a trusted contractor and then help to negotiate that whole process. And then once the house is renovated, Heat Squad will help a household access some of the state incentives available. So it's a very comprehensive and thorough process, and Heat Squad is there to support households throughout the entire process. And there are also some low income options. Income qualifying residents can qualify for a discounted price of $50, as well as expanded incentives through their partnership with Efficiency Vermont and the Vermont Low Income Trust for Electricity, or VLIT. And so since moving to Bennington County in 2014, Heat Squad has had some success. It's conducted 500 energy audits and 200 projects, and about 120 of those were low income. Moving on, another organization I want to talk about is Efficiency Vermont. And so Efficiency Vermont is an efficiency utility. It's one of 3 in the state. And so what these are is that they're organizations created by the Public Utilities Commission to orchestrate and to encourage energy efficiency measures for households and for businesses. And so Efficiency Vermont primarily does this by offering rebates and incentives for households. So if I install a heat pump, Efficiency Vermont will give me $2,000 to deduct from the cost. And so they offer rebates and incentives to really help drive down these costs and make projects more accessible. And the two programs I want to talk about today, first of all, is the Home Performance with Energy Star rebate. And so this is Efficiency Vermont's main comprehensive, broad weatherization rebate. So what this is that if a household uses an Efficiency Vermont approved contractor, Efficiency Vermont will cover the cost of 75% of the project, up for a minimum payout of maximum payout, of $2,000. And then for income qualifying residents, so households that are below a certain income threshold, Efficiency Vermont will cover up to 75% of the cost for up to $5,000. And so it's a expanded rebate that offers more savings for households. And it's been a fairly popular program. Since in 2021, they offered 63 of these rebates in Bennington County, and I've offered 216 since 2019. Another offering they have is the income-based energy bill reduction program. And so Efficiency Vermont has a whole suite of offerings for low-income residents for a whole host of different services that they offer. And one of them is to help households lower their energy costs for little or no cost. And so one thing that they do is that they'll come to houses and they'll replace inefficient or energy intensive appliances for little or no cost, or they'll come to houses and kind of talk through what are some efficiency measures they can look into. And they can also offer some behavioral lessons of what homeowners can do themselves to lower their energy usage. And finally, the other thing I want to talk about today is the home energy loan. And so this is a program run through Efficiency Vermont in partnership with 3 financial institutions, chief among them being VSECU, or the Vermont State Employee Credit Union. And so what this is an expansive loan opportunity with attractive conditions. So borrowers can borrow up to $20,000 with terms up to 15 years. And for households who make less than $90,000, they can get a 5-year loan at 0% interest. And then after 5 years, the interest rate goes up to about 1 to 2%. And so as Lori Fielder from VSCCU describes it, it's basically free money for low-income residents to finance projects and to really just have more access to weatherization programs. And it's been a pretty successful program. Statewide, since launching in 2019, VSCCU has offered over 1,000 loans, over a quarter of which have been for low-income residents and almost half of which have been for moderate income residents. Here in Bennington, they've had some success. Since November 2021, so in the last 9-10 months, they've offered 13 home energy loans, 5 of which have gone to low-income households and 3 of which have gone to moderate income households. So I just want a lot of information at you, a lot of different organizations, a lot of different numbers. So I just want to quickly recap. So FROC is that local organization, that local state-funded organization that offers free comprehensive weatherization, and it's done 79 projects in the last year. Heat Squad is that independent organization that does weatherization assistance, so start to finish support, and they've done 500 audits and 200 projects since moving to Bennington in 2014. Efficiency Vermont is that efficiency utility that offers a rebate program and also just household assistance. And VCCU is one of the financial institutions that's offering loan opportunities. So as you can see from here, these programs are fairly popular. There are people who are taking advantage of the programs and utilizing their benefits and getting savings from them. But considering what the state goals are and where we want to be and how far behind we are in those goals, particularly in low income access, these aren't really the numbers that we'd like to be. These aren't the numbers of a scale or certain magnitude that we'd like to be seeing. And what's interesting is that these programs are intended to help lower costs for residents, and they've been doing so. But the fact that we're not seeing massive uptake as well means that there's other things involved that our current system isn't really accounting for. And so the next section of this presentation, I'm gonna talk a little about what are some of the barriers and what are some of the things that we need to kind of think about as we continue to create new programming for low-income residents. And so the first one, and the one that most people jump to very quickly, is tenure status. And so this is because renters are significantly limited in their ability to weatherize their homes. And this is primarily because of what's called the split incentive phenomenon. And so essentially, renters, since they don't own their properties, they have to defer to their landlords before they can do any major renovation. But because in this situation, the landlord is responsible for the cost and the project administration, but the savings from from weatherization are going to be directed towards the tenants. The landlord isn't going to see those savings, and as a result, is going to be disincentivized from actually taking action on weatherizing these properties. And because renters don't really have much leverage over their landlords, there's not much they can do. And so this is a serious issue, primarily in Bennington County. Over a quarter of residents here are renters. And so a large portion of our population is generally limited in their ability to weatherize. This also significantly hurts low-income residents because low-income residents are more likely to be renters. Using census data, we can calculate that about over 40% of renters in Bennington County are in that bottom 20% of income earners. And so what's important to recognize here is that of the people who would otherwise be able to qualify for these programs, for these low-income programs that are supposed to help low-income uptake weatherization, many of them just can't access that because they are renters. Again, using census data, we can calculate that 44% of people who qualify for BROC weatherization, so free comprehensive weatherization, are renters. And so almost half of the people who income qualify for BROC are fairly limited and restricted because they're renters. And so this is a whole subsection that our current offerings are not really meeting. What's interesting here, which I want to mention also, is that while 44% of households are renters, 56% of households are homeowners. And so these homeowners are not restricted from taking advantage of these programs. And so the fact that we're still seeing limited uptake amongst homeowners suggests that there are other things going on as well. And a major thing I want to talk about in terms of another barrier is information overload. It is great that the state has so many entities and agencies and efficiency utilities and organizations and nonprofits and you name it, different organizations that are all contributing to the weatherization effort in some capacity, offering some service or some incentive or some financing opportunity. But because there are so many different offerings and so many different entities involved, it can quickly become overwhelming for residents. People who are looking to weatherize their homes might be concerned that as they wade through all these options, they don't know if they've found all the options available, if they're going to maximize their offer or they're maximize their savings. There's just so much information that these customers can quickly become inundated by all of it, overwhelmed, and just simply discouraged from taking advantage of the programs. And so we're losing people because it's quite confusing. Similarly, not only are there so many organizations involved, but there's also so many organizations that are generally acting independently of each other, despite the fact that they're doing overlapping and intersecting work. That's not to say that there's no coordination amongst them. Referrals are pretty common amongst them. For example, Heat Squad will tell a customer about BROC if they qualify for that. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some partnerships between, for example, Heat Squad, Efficiency Vermont, and VLight. But because there's no larger system to kind of coordinate amongst all the different entities, the system in itself has become a bit too confusing and complex, especially because there's a lot of overlap between the different organizations and because all the different organizations offer tangential or overlapping or intersecting kind of offerings. So we're asking customers to kind of navigate this very confusing system. And this permeates into a couple different issues. For example, there's few cohesive and just large scale systematic efforts to clarify the differences in organizations to the larger public. And it is quite confusing sometimes. I mean, BROC does comprehensive free weatherization, but only for low income residents. And Heat Squad works for all income levels, but doesn't actually do weatherization, does weatherization assistance. And Efficiency Vermont isn't on the ground doing any weatherization. They're just offering incentives. And so there's so many different organizations that kind of all piece together into a larger apparatus, larger system. But to the larger public, it can become very confusing as to who does what. And without little efforts to clarify that or to work together to clarify that, we're making it harder for customers to really understand what's happening, to really understand the whole system. Also, beyond the lack of coordination or a little complexity in the information, there is not that much coordination in terms of the process itself. All the different organizations use their own income eligibility levels and requirements, and their own energy audit methods, and their own metrics of success, or what their goals are for weatherization, or their own savings and estimates. And so because every different entity is utilizing their own system and their own their own process, it becomes very difficult for customers to move from one to another, even when they're just comparing their options. And so again, because there's no larger centralized coordination, a larger system amongst them, we're creating added work for customers. And finally, there are few large-scale cross-organizational collaborative programs. There are some, of course. The Heat Spot Efficiency Vermont one and V-Light is the biggest one I can mention, and it's quite effective. We're not seeing on a very large scale different organizations kind of recognize where they intersect with each other and where they overlap, and create one larger centralized opportunity, one larger product for customers. And so as a result, customers are kind of left to piece together all the different organizations for themselves, rather than all the organizations kind of come together and offer all the different specialties at once for customers. And so kind of articulate and demonstrate this point that I've been talking about a little bit, and to kind of pull it all together, I've developed this bit of a thought experiment. So hypothetically, I'm a homeowner and I make less than $60,000 a year, and I call Heat Squad, and they come to my house and they tell me that I need about $9,500 of work done to weatherize my home. And so that is a significant expense. That is something that, even if I do have the ability to pay, is a significant chunk of my income and my savings out just on this home renovation. But through state programs and through all these incentives, I can significantly lower my cost. For example, because I'm working with Heat Squad, I can now call up EVT and a V-Light and get reimbursed for over 2/3 of my cost. So $6,500. And so now out of pocket, I'm paying $3,000. So that is a much lower cost. That's significantly reduced. And even if I'm still not comfortable paying that, I can now call up VSCCU and ask to do a home energy loan at 0% interest, because that is something I can do because I qualify for it. And so now, instead of paying $3,000 a month, I'm paying $3,000 upfront. Excuse me. I'm paying $50 a month, which is a much smaller cost and something that I can more easily manage, much easily budget for. And so, all also say is that there is a very comprehensive system for me to lower my costs and for make weatherization more accessible for me. But it does require me to know who all the actors are, and to really piece together all the different offerings in a way that is cohesive and comprehensive. And in this case, the only reason why this is an effective system is because Heat Squad has coordinated with Efficiency Vermont and V-Light to create a more comprehensive offering, and they're offering to do a lot of the work for me. But in other cases where that coordination doesn't exist, we're asking a lot of people to be fully versed and to know how to navigate all of this and to piece together all these different offerings in a way that will maximize their savings. And finally, to tie this point together, I think it's important to recognize who we're talking about here. We're talking about low-income residents and people who are living in poverty. So people who might be working long hours or multiple jobs. They're making sure that they have food on the table, and that their kids are in school, and that they're paying rent, and that they have health insurance. And so they might not have the time or the mental bandwidth to do a large-scale home renovation, let alone have the time to navigate this very complex system that we've created, and to coordinate with different entities and to piece together them at the right time and go through all these processes and different processes to maximize their savings. And so essentially, to tie it all together, it's all been this very roundabout way of saying that the system that we've created and all the different offerings, because of how they're currently structured, require a lot of time and effort and energy that for many low-income residents, they might not have the time to give. And so as a result, they might just be dissuaded from getting involved. So essentially, although we want to make weatherization more accessible, the programs to do that are becoming increasingly inaccessible because of the complexity of all of it. Moving on a little bit, I want to talk about some other barriers as well. Among them is financial limitations. And so financing is a central component in cost reduction. The home energy loan is considered a very sufficient way to help finance projects and to bring down that cost for households. But just because credit exists does not mean that it's available and accessible for all residents. For example, low-income residents are more likely to have spotty or no credit history at all. They're more likely to have defaulted in the past, or to have gone bankrupt, or just not have enough financial activity to have an adequate credit score. And so they might not be able to qualify for these loans. And so this is something that they're excluded from. This is a program that would be very helpful that they don't have access to. And even if they do have access to a loan, they also might be wary to take out one in the first place because they're concerned about over leverage. That if they take on another loan, they're going to be pushed farther to inescapable debt, or that if they are paying off a loan and then an unforeseen cost comes up, they're going to be so overexposed that they're not going to be able to pay off their expenses and just be in a much worse financial situation. Another interesting barrier is land conditions. Here in Bennington County, we're facing an aging housing stock. 40% of houses in the county were built before 1960, and over 30% were built before 1940. And so these houses are likely to need more extensive home renovation, weatherization services. And not only that, they might need renovations that have to take place before weatherization and projects that aren't actually covered by our current weatherization offerings. So households that are old might have asbestos that needs to be removed, or they might need vermiculite removal or their roofs redone. And these are very expensive projects that aren't covered by Efficiency Vermont. There is no asbestos removal rebate, for example. And so these are added costs that people who live in these houses have to face, and as a result, just might not be able to weatherize in the first place. And this is also specifically hurting low-income residents, because low-income residents are more likely to live in these older and less well-maintained houses. And that's for a variety of reasons. That's because these houses tend to be less expensive, and also as a general principle, low-income residents traditionally live in these older houses because of the history of redlining or zoning issues in the area. And so as a result, they are just disproportionately faced with these added costs that aren't covered by the current weatherization offerings and are essentially priced out still. There are also just a bunch of barriers related to the uncertainty that comes with living in poverty that we have to account for. First of all, there's the issue of income instability. If I'm not sure if I'm going to have a stable income in the future, I don't want to make a large home renovation or take out a loan if I don't know if I'm going to have the ability to pay that off in the future, if I don't know if I'm going to have the income to pay it off. There's also the issue of housing instability. Low-income households are more than twice as likely to have moved in last year than wealthy residents. And so they might not want to do a large home renovation if they don't know if they're going to be in the same house in a couple of years, or if they're going to be in the same house by the time the weatherization project pays itself off. Excuse me. And finally, again, there's that issue of the unforeseen costs, that if I'm paying off the renovation or if I'm paying off a loan and an unforeseen cost comes up, so I have a health scare or my car breaks down, I have insurance costs or my rent goes up, and I just don't have enough available income for me because I'm paying off all these costs, then I'm going to be in a worse financial situation. Moving on a little bit, I've talked a lot about demand side issues right now that we've been seeing, but there's also some supply side issues, and chief among them is a massive labor shortage. We simply don't have enough contractors in the area to do the work that we need to get done right now. According to a report by the Energy Action Network here in Vermont, we need to increase our supply of contractors and just workers generally by 5 times in order to meet our energy goals. And we're actually moving in the opposite direction, to be honest. According to a report done for the state, between 2020 and 2021, the state actually lost 8 to 9% of workers who work in energy efficiency. And so we currently just don't have the contractors and the workers to meet the work to do the work. And that has been seen across the board for a lot of the different people who are doing weatherization. Melanie Paskovic, the director of Heat Squad, told me that at this point, they just don't have enough crews to really meet the demand of people who want to get their homes weatherized before winter. At this point, people might have started looking towards weatherizing their home next spring or even up to next winter, just because in the following winter from now, because we just don't really have the people to do the work. Brock told me that at some times they've had 6 to 8 crews in Bennington doing work. By this point, they really only have 1 crew working for the entire county. And so we just don't have enough workers to do the weatherization. And finally, one other barrier I want to talk about is just data. We are here at the local level, we are just struggling to have enough comprehensive data and reporting to know how we are doing and to adequately create programs and to adequately do targeted outreach. And this permeates into a couple different issues. First of all, we don't have enough data to know how we are doing, how we are progressing towards those goals, towards our weatherization goals, and to who is doing the most work and whether or not we're reaching local residents. While the state does offer a very comprehensive number of how many houses have been renovated statewide and by who, that doesn't really trickle down to a local level. And so instead, all we have available to us is the data that we can get from all the different organizations involved. But this actually is quite difficult for a couple reasons. First of all, a lot of the different organizations don't have regular reporting or don't have reporting that on a very continuous basis. Also, all the different organizations use generally different metrics. They might do how many projects they've done or how much savings they've produced, or just very different ways of accounting for the work that they've done. And so it makes it very hard to convert and to create estimates that are accurate and comprehensive and that we can trust to understand how we're doing statewide or down here at the local level. And so we are unable to know how our current offer, we are struggling to know how our current offerings are helping or if they are reaching the people that we want them to reach. Another issue with this data issue weatherization is that a lot of the current data available doesn't actually look at this through a low income lens. Efficiency Vermont, for example, while it does have data on a county and local level, it doesn't really distinguish between those who might qualify for regular rebates versus expanded rebates. For example, for the home performance rebate, they don't distinguish between who qualifies for the $2,000 and who qualifies for the $5,000. It's just those 63 people who got the rebate in 2021. Moving on, another issue is we don't have a lot of accurate and comprehensive data on costs and savings. Although, again, the cost and savings of a weatherization project is very case specific and dependent on the size and the scope of the project. We still struggle to have a very adequate baseline or a very formulaic way of determining what those costs are. And again, that is all pretty scattered across the different organizations involved, all of them having, again, their own estimates. And so as a result, it's hard for us to get a sense of what the costs are and what more we can be doing. And it's also difficult for customers and for residents to understand what are the different offerings and whose estimates can they trust when they're making their cost benefit analysis in terms of should they weatherize. And finally, there just isn't that much data. There isn't a lot of data. There's some data, but there isn't that much comprehensive data or reporting or studies that have been look into who are the households that we're looking into. So there's been few reports on how many people in the area might qualify for certain programs, what types of services they need, and what types of weatherization services they need, measures they need, excuse me. And there's few reports that talk about what areas have been most underserved, for example. I know Efficiency Vermont does break it down to a town level, but we have yet to kind of really map out where in the county are the people that we're looking for and whether or not we're reaching them. And so as a result, just without a true comprehensive data set and just very standardized data that we can use, we are having trouble understanding where we are. So I've talked about a lot of the issues in our current system. And now finally, I'm gonna spend some time talking about some of the things I think we can do to kind of begin to adjust and tinker and to improve things. And first and foremost, I think we need to increase coordination amongst stakeholders to clarify responsibilities and maximize savings. So as I've talked about, the system that we have so far and all the different offerings is quite complex and confusing and at times unnecessarily time consuming. And so we need to begin to find ways to kind of streamline that process and cut through that tape. And that first involves working with service providers and stakeholders and policymakers to identify areas where there is overlap and unnecessary confusion and begin to streamline that process. And that can take a variety of forms of work. For example, just working with stakeholders to very clearly differentiate what are the different objectives and responsibilities and scopes of the different organizations. So making sure that everyone knows that BROC does this and Heat Squad does that and EVT does that. And then also effectively communicating that to the public. So making sure that we are collaborating with the shareholders and with other interested parties to make sure that we're producing materials that very clearly outline for residents what are the available options, who are the available service providers, what do they provide, what are the benefits, and what are the costs, and what are the savings associated with each one to help very clearly differentiate them from each other to kind of clarify things and help get through some of that information jumble. Secondly, we also need to make sure that we have a very centralized system and a much more comprehensive and cohesive system. So that we make sure that we have consistent income eligibilities and consistent metrics of success and different estimates to make sure that as customers and residents move across different organizations to look for certain opportunities, that they are working within one system as opposed to a bunch of different scattered ones. For example, if all the organizations decided to use AMI, area median income, as the general baseline for how they would set their eligibility requirements, that is a lot more effective than having just all picking their own, because it does work for each one of them, but it does create confusion out of work for customers. And so having a more centralized system so people can so people can quickly and at a much faster pace know where to go and know what are the offerings and which one does what. Similarly, I think it's also important that we have a much more standardized and uniform form of reporting. So making sure that the organizations are reporting regularly what they're doing and reporting on a very standardized, uniform way so that we can create comprehensive information and share that with the public. So share how much progress we've done and what are the costs across the different organizations so that we can offer comprehensive data for our program development and for the public. Another way that can help to kind of maximize savings and to clarify the process for everyone is to support and promote the Green Saving Smart program. And so this is a new pilot program being run by the state and being run out of BROC. And so this is a group of financial coaches that work with low-income residents to understand and map out their financial situation and begin to take steps to improve that situation. And specifically, they look at energy efficiency measures and weatherization and state offerings as a mechanism to ease financial burden off households and to kind of put them on a better path. And so this is a great opportunity for low-income residents to have someone to truly work with them and to truly work with them to understand the whole system and the whole process and figure out what is going to be the best option for them to maximize their savings. And so this is a great program I think we should be looking into more. Moving on a little bit, I also think it's important that we increase our outreach specifically to low to moderate income communities. Right off the bat, this includes making sure that towns and organizations that will work with low-income residents in the area, so BROC and GBICS, which is the interfaith organization, and community groups, and those service providers that I talked about, work together to develop and distribute materials that offer comprehensive information and information about the energy and financing options, and that are specifically targeted towards the needs of low-income residents. So this involves having comprehensive and transparent information on, what weatherization is, what are the benefits, what are the costs, what are the savings, and how could this help to ease financial or non-financial burdens away from low-income residents. Also, when we're talking about outreach, we also need to make sure that we're utilizing grassroots and community-based outreach methods. Here at my time during the BCRC, I've heard a lot about how a lot of our programs struggle to get a lot of uptake or a lot of popularity because people are generally cynical of the government, whether that's a town or the BCRC or the state government or an outside organization coming in and telling them what they need and what's going to help them. There's just a lot of cynicism and disdain for general elitism. So we need to make sure that as we're reaching out to these communities, that we are really going to them and meeting them where they are and integrating ourselves into the communities and truly listening to what they need. So that involves us tabling at events and making presentation at gatherings so we can be on the ground talking to people and talking to them about what they need and talking about what we can offer. We're doing neighborhood demonstrations. So if my neighbor weatherized their home and they're willing to show me what they did and what are the benefits, that is a lot more effective than someone at the BCRC coming to my door and telling me they need to weatherize. In fact, both Ann Lawless and Melanie Paskovic at Heat Squad both told me that most of their customers come from local referrals, come from neighbors or relatives or community members who have heard about things from other people, heard about Heat Squad from other people. And so this is just an indication that being on the ground and working within the networks that already exist is really effective in reaching out to people. Also, I think it's important to mention that we also can be utilizing we can also be working with towns and working with them to do a lot of the on the ground outreach. A lot of the organizations I've spoken to have told me that unfortunately they just don't really have that much outreach infrastructure here in Bennington, and that's really limited their ability to reach communities. And so towns, as town officials and planning committees and energy committees, as interconnected individuals, as people who are part of our towns and part of our everyday lives, they can be on the ground people who can really tell us, who can really spread awareness about these programs. And also they can utilize town resources to do larger events about weatherization, so forums, gatherings, and they also can do like a weatherize campaign where they can push residents to do this work. Moving on a little bit, I think it's important that we take some time to think about how we can ease this workforce bottleneck that we're seeing, because we can really help to improve our outreach and our programs, but it doesn't do much if we can't actually do the work. And so a lot of this work is a bit more long-term, but I think it's still important to recognize. First of all, this just involves making sure the state is properly investing in vocational training as a quality education and as a valid and proper alternative to a four-year college experience. According to a report from Physicians of Vermont, most people, one of the reasons why there's been stagnation in this field is just because people are struggling to see vocational programming as another option compared to a four-year college program. It's making sure that we are promoting and investing in these programs as good options for people to go to have a very successful career. We also need to make sure that we also need to take efforts to make the career and make working weatherization more competitive and more attractive in the job market. First and foremost, this just involves increasing the pay for state employed crew members. Broad crew workers make a starting salary of about $20.60 an hour, and this is a pretty good starting salary, but by pushing it higher up, we can push the entire state market-based salary, because then crews will have to private crews will have to keep up with that state price, that state salary, and so we can increase the pay and make it more financially attractive. And also by raising the pay, we can make these jobs more we can generate more value and respect for these jobs. Also, we can work to do more promotion and outreach and marketing campaigns that counteract the poor perceptions about working weatherization. Admittedly, as I've been hearing a lot of the times, weatherization isn't the nicest job to be working in sometimes. You're crawling through attics and crawl spaces in really tight spots, or you're just in really uncomfortable or gross conditions. And also there's some concerns about the kind of the fluctuation in demand and the fluctuation in the ability to find work essentially. And that does dissuade people from getting involved in the job market. And so taking steps to kind of counteract that with some of the benefits. Some people talked about the satisfaction of working in homes and making people more comfortable in their homes. And so that is a great place where we can start to really promote these programs. And yeah, another thing is another thing we can do is to really work to advertise and do outreach at a more pivotal time people's lives. So going to high schools to promote weatherization as a career path, as an option for students. So doing career fairs or having service providers come in and talk about what they do, or working with Southwest Vermont Tech, which is the local high school vocational program, to expand offerings and to offer more outreach to really tell kids about their options and really expose them to weatherization. And finally, this is more of a more short-term one, which I think is really important that we do now so we can ease this bottleneck, is to encourage contractors and workers in tangential fields. So roofing, electrical work, or other similar work to move into weatherization. So these people have the adequate expertise and the knowledge and the equipment to very quickly move into weatherization. And it's actually a pretty good business decision to do. And by doing so, and by encouraging them, we can get a greater supply and ease some of this bottleneck. And finally, I think it's important that we take some time to talk about renters, because this is a group that kind of adjusting our current systems and offering more financial incentives might not actually reach very effectively. And so we need to start thinking about some other options available. First of all, we can use state mandates and incentives to ensure that public and affordable housing developments are weatherized. And this way we can ensure that at least a subsection of renters and those who are particularly vulnerable have access to weatherization and are getting weatherization services. Also, by making public housing and affordable housing developments weatherized, we are making them more competitive and thus pushing landlords to weatherize themselves to remain competitive. We also can support the expansion of 3 Thermal into Bennington. 3 Thermal is an organization that was primarily based in central Vermont, but has now gone statewide. And they are, in my mind, essentially the heat squad of multifamily housing units. They will do comprehensive assistance for landlords and renters to figure out how they can weatherize homes at minimal cost and maximize savings. And so having them as a resource is really effective. And finally, another one I want to talk about is supporting the development of renters unions. This is a bigger thing in larger cities. For example, in New York City, there are many renters unions that are currently working to lower rent prices. But here in Bennington County, we can encourage renters to work together with each other and to leverage their collective power and to correct some of the asymmetries between them and their landlords, to bring them to the table and to kind of push them and force them to weatherize the better of the entire building, and to talk about ways that they can share that burden. So just working together and to bargain collectively to drive a conversation to kind of get things moving a little bit. Yeah, thank you so much. Any questions?
Thanks, Josh. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? You just did such a good job, Josh. I guess
said everything.
Nobody has any
needed to be said.
questions. You answered every possible question with your presentation.
Nothing else to ask. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Going once, going twice. All right then. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. This presentation will be shortly posted on our YouTube page and on our BCRC website, along with Josh's slide deck separately. And once again, the presentation that he gave last week on community solar is currently up if you would like to watch that, because you missed that. That was equally informative. So I encourage you to watch it and to share this link widely once it's available. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.